David White, founding partner at Menlo Coaching, and I'm here today to help Kate prepare for her interview with Columbia Business School. Kate works for the middle market investment bank Cowen there on the West Coast, and Kate, you're interviewing in just a couple of days with an alum, is that right?
Correct.
And what I'd like to do today, I'll run you through some of the most common kind of interview questions that I expect you'll face, and we'll do it in a pretty relaxed way so we can go back and forth and I can give you feedback on the answers, and probably you can try some of them more than once until you find that you're answering it just how you want to. Well, the questions that I pick are going to be based on the fact that MBA admissions interviewers are usually looking for pretty predictable things, and they're not, in most cases, kind of trying to trick you. So they will almost always give you a very friendly start. They want to put you at ease. They want you to feel good about the interview. So they'll probably start something like this. Well, Kate, thanks for coming out to see me. Look, I've got your resume up over here, but why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself in your own words?
Nice to meet you, David. So I upon graduating college, my first job was at an investor relations firm, which is basically just outsourced IR for public companies. We advise the CEOs and CFOs on generally their shareholder communications. We wrote their earnings releases and transcripts and all of that. It was a great first job out of college because I got to work with the C-suite directly. So it was really great hands-on experience. But all of the senior producers at my company were former buy or sell side analysts. So you definitely needed that experience to move up. So I decided I wanted to make the move to the sell side. I got to read the equity research in my inbox each morning on all the companies we worked with, and I was really fascinated by reading that. And after some research and networking, I realized equity sales would be the perfect job for me because it still involved that equity research, but I also got to leverage my people skills. So after about a year of interviewing, I finally got my foot in the door with the offer from Cowen. I had to work under, or the offer was to work under a senior salesperson as an associate it's supposed to loosely be a 2-year program. I ended up getting promoted after 5 months. And that was exciting. They gave me 10 accounts, but I had the reign to go out and find my own accounts and grow my commission. And I now built my own book of 50 clients. And also it's a commission only shop. So there's no salary to fall back on. So it's a little unnerving sometimes, but it's taught me accountability, and I ultimately like being in control of my own earnings. So that's where I am now. My primary job is selling equity research on a day-to-day basis, but in the last year, our firm started focusing more on selling banking deals, and that's by far my favorite part of the job. And that's led me to why I want to be an investment banker, and I think I need an MBA to make that pivot.
Okay, great. So when they're interviewing MBA applicants, what do you suppose is the most common way that people answer the question about, tell me about yourself?
Well, I guess I just dove right into my resume. I didn't say anything about where I'm from or any personal background. So I guess I could have started with that, but I was just trying to walk through my resume.
Because I think you have a lot of tremendous kind of material to work with in your resume, because then you have a promotion, which is great. And then you've interacted with a number of senior executives, which is good. And I think one of the parts that is actually really impressive if you present it is that you had to go and build your own book of business, because so many people, even in kind of elite investment banking jobs, they're just working on the deals that are given to them. Mm-hmm. But then when people answer this question, this kind of chronological walkthrough, well, first I went to college, then, you won't believe it, but next I got this job in finance, then I got another job in finance, can be the kind of thing that they've heard so many times before, whereas you might be able to kind of jump in and highlight certain things at the front because you're in total control. You can answer this question in almost any way. What would you think is there any kind of a short statement that, without getting too cute or too clever, could you either kind of highlight some of these professional achievements, or even, as you said, you could give them a statement that you have certain things that are important to you personally and professionally? Because I saw in the resume that you were a competitive gymnast, and I don't know if there's any little piece of that, but it could be much easier to remember the champion gymnast who also sells directly to a lot of CEOs versus the kind of, first I went to college, then I got a job, then I got another job kind of.
Yeah. I would also, I think it's important that I didn't mention this. I moved out to San Francisco 2 years ago. I kept the same job, but I did that to pursue skiing and the outdoors, which is something I'm really passionate about. So I probably could have thrown that in there with the career progression.
So what do you think would be the kind of opening statement, as it were, that would capture everything best for you? What would you like in terms of that?
You mean just to make it shorter? I would just say my first job out of college. Yeah.
We probably will make the answer a tiny bit shorter, but then in terms of the things that you want to highlight right out of the gate, then what would you say?
I would say I'm from outside of Boston. I started in investor relations in New York, and I transitioned to equity sales. I recently moved out to San Francisco to pursue the outdoors, and I want to pivot into selling banking deals because it's my favorite part of the job right now.
Yeah.
I want to pivot into investment banking because selling banking deals is my favorite part of my job.
Because then that's all the kind of chronological steps. I do think that the thing that you moved because of including also non-professional reasons, is interesting, that you have another passion that's so strong that you would do it. But then what's a way that you could kind of work in some of these cool professional achievements, like the fact that you sell to these senior executives kind of right in the front? Like, for example, maybe if your interviewer didn't know that much about equity sales or equity research, then one way you could kind of introduce the job would be, well, hi, my name is Kate. I work in equity sales, which, well, you may wonder exactly what that means. It means that I have to sell shares in IPOs or secondary offerings to chief investment officers at places like this, and actually one of the really stressful parts about the job is that I'm not given any accounts by the firm. I had to do everything myself through cold calling, and suddenly, like, that's probably way more exciting than that you're just another Excel jockey grinding through models forever. Think for a moment, and then let's do this one again where you can tell about some of these exciting parts right up front.
So do you think it would be better not to focus on my first job, just focus on my job right now and what's exciting about that?
I think that's probably stronger, because one of the things that's always true in these interviews, they can ask you more questions if they want, and they've always seen your resume beforehand. So especially to the extent that the first job is less exciting than your current job and there's nothing so distinctive about it, they can ask a question if they want to know more.
So I would say...
Hey, thanks for coming out. Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I currently work in equity sales at Cowen. Most of my job is selling equity research on a day-to-day basis. But what I find... Actually, sorry.
Just keep going. You're doing fine.
I sell equity research on a day-to-day basis, but what I love the most about my job is when we get to market a banking deal, because I get to understand that company inside and out. And versus when I'm selling equity research, I have a mile-wide understanding of the 500 names. I don't always have an answer to my clients' questions, but on the deals, I'm really deep in the weeds, and I find that I add much more value that way. So that's inspired me to want to pursue a career in investment banking, so I can be even deeper in that process.
I would encourage you that you can tell a little bit more about the current job, because I do think it's impressive that you would build your kind of book of business from scratch. So you don't have to focus only on what's next. You can take some pride in these exciting things that you've done already.
Yeah, okay. I left that part out. Yeah, so I guess I would say I'd say I sell equity research on a day-to-day basis, and it's a challenging job because it's a commission-only firm. I have no salary to fall back on. So I've been responsible for building out my whole book of business. I was given 10 clients when I started, but the rein to go out and buy more, or go out and find more, which I've now grown into 50 clients. And the trades that those clients do with me every day is entirely the dollars that I bring home. So it's definitely taught me accountability. And even though it's unnerving sometimes, I ultimately like being in control of my own earnings.
Yeah. I think that the part about how you are in this pure commission only job and you built it from scratch, and that's both kind of terrifying and exciting in a positive way. That's the kind of story that's really exciting to listen to. So I like what you're doing there. Then, somewhere pretty soon they will work their way around to, well, what are the reasons that you want to pursue an MBA?
So as I mentioned, I really want to get into investment banking. I'm peripherally involved in it right now, kind of in the last step of a banking deal when our bankers need to raise equity for a company. As a salesperson, I come in at the last step and help place those shares with my clients who are institutional money managers. And I find that rewarding, but I feel like the bankers really make the most impact because they're the ones that are helping this company get better access to capital so it can grow. So I want to be deeper in that process as a banker, and I think I need an MBA for that. I have a good conceptual understanding of finance. I understand the big picture of how investors value stocks, and I conceptually understand the 3 financial statements, but sometimes when we get into the weeds on an M&A deal, I get a little lost on, where all the funding is coming from and how you get to the value of the pro forma company. So I feel like I really need some more formal fundamental finance training that I never got. So I think an MBA would help me get there, and then I can go work at a investment banking associate program after I graduate.
Yeah, good. So I like the way that you begin with telling the career goal in a very specific way, which makes it really easy to listen to the answer and figure out what's coming next. So let me ask a kind of a rhetorical question. What are interviewers usually looking for as they listen to the kind of career goal or the why you're going to pursue an MBA?
That you have something that makes sense and is reachable. So I tried to convey both of those.
Absolutely. So they do want to know that you're going to get a job. In the short run, they want their employment report to look good. In the long run, they hope that there's at least some chance you might become phenomenally successful as a banker and then donate money back to the school later. Then, what's the second thing that they are also looking for? So suppose you've checked the box on, yes, you will get that job. What else are they also looking for as you explain the why an MBA?
Well, I know they don't just want you to take from them to benefit yourself. They want to hear that you can give back. It's not just transactional. That you're going to add value to their program. But I guess to your point about giving back, that's the same thing.
That's also true. But then the other thing that they are looking for is that you understand their program and the kind of resources within it. So
they're not, so you want to go to their program.
They're not shy about the fact that you will benefit from the MBA because every applicant is looking to get a better job. But then, so if we break down the answer here, I think you did a great job of kind of saying what the goal is, even though potentially there's a tiny bit of room that if you thought that your experience aligned you with certain kinds of industries, if you were aiming to cover that industry as an investment banker, you could make that point, but the goal statement was very clear. Then kind of in the next part about convincing them that you will get the job, what could you do to map out a little bit more how your skills would transfer to an investment banking role? Because then it's clear that you're in finance and you deal with companies that are the same kind of clients for banking, but how could you map out some more fine-grained connections between your skills and the banking role?
Yeah, I would say that so much of my job in equity sales is it's relationship building. That's how I had to build the book of 50 clients. And those skills are definitely necessary in banking because you have to go out and generate your own business. So I would say that I feel like I have the interpersonal skills and relationship building skills to make a successful banker, but the missing piece is the more technical understanding of finance.
Yeah, I think that the argument is a good one about the client management skills. So only one kind of maybe reservation about having the technical skills be the main point of an MBA.
Yeah.
Because if you look at an MBA, it's just so expensive after you think of $150,000 of tuition, your living costs on top of that, and then giving up your compensation now, which may be significant. And then if you want to just learn technical finance,
right,
in a certain sense, you can go to the bookstore.
Yeah.
You can, exactly. Then what's unique about the MBA is that even though you could learn the kind of hardcore facts and figures on some M&A finance topic from a book, then in an MBA, you'll be surrounded by lots of people who have done investment banking roles already, some of whom have already had the associate promotion. And then you'll be able to do things like learning firsthand from them. What's the culture like at different investment banks to know which one fits you? You'll be able to learn from them about the recruiting process. And then it may even be that as accomplished as you are with the client management and your sales results, almost everyone still has some room to improve their soft skills, whether that's more on presentations and negotiation, or whether for you that's a little different and maybe your focus area would be that as an associate in banking, you need to manage the analysts beneath you. Mm-hmm. Then it's reassuring if you're also looking for some things that are not just hard skills, because that's the unique part that you can only get from this MBA environment where you're surrounded by all these people versus the stuff where you can just read a book.
So I should add something in about how I'm looking for build a network that will propel me to the next stage or that I think a network is crucial for success, and I want to have that network to propel me to the next stage of my career.
Yeah, though I do think that you want to give a tiny bit of commentary beyond just praising a network in the abstract. You could highlight the things like picking the right bank that you want to join after the MBA, or saying that maybe your classmates will be a source of deal flow for you in the future, things like that. So since this one is such a core question, let's go ahead. I promise I won't do it on every question, but let's do the why an MBA one again, where you get to kind of drill in a little bit more on how your client-facing skills would transfer beautifully to investment banking roles, especially as you advance towards the VP role from your first associate role. And then a little bit more about kind of some of the benefits that you'll get from the MBA that are the softer ones, not just kind of learning the technical M&A finance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So as I mentioned, I want to pivot into investment banking, which is something I'm peripherally involved in right now. I'm involved in the last step of a banking deal when I place the shares, the newly issued shares with my clients. And I find it's rewarding helping my clients find stocks that go up, but I feel like the bankers really make the most impact on the company because they helped the company get on sound footing and position it for growth. So I want to be deeper involved in banking. I feel like I have the soft skills from my experience in equity sales, having to have built my own book of business from 10 clients to 50. I really have good interpersonal and relationship skills that are going to be valuable in banking when I have to go build my own book of business there. But I feel like I'm lacking on the technical finance skills. I have more of a conceptual understanding of it. And I get a little lost in the weeds sometimes on our M&A deals. So I'm hoping to get that, to learn more from the curriculum at an MBA. But I also think the network, Columbia's network, especially in New York City, the center of investment banking, is paramount. And there's won't be any better network to get me into one of the best investment banking programs out of my MBA, and it will help me as I climb the ranks further. throughout my career.
Yeah. I thought that you were starting to map out some of the connections at a more detailed level, and that was nice.
Okay.
How did you like that version of the answer?
Yeah. I think that's to incorporate something too specifically about Columbia and mention New York City, because I know they love hearing that. That's one of the main pillars to the MBA there.
And there's a reason that they put their thing in the logo at the very center of business. They really do believe it. Whether Harlem or Morningside Heights is the center of business, that can be debated separately.
Questionable.
Now, this kind of brings us around to one other kind of broader stylistic thing. So even though the kind of content of these questions is pretty factual or rational, logical, this is the job I want, here's the actions I'm going to take to get that job, here's the transferable skills I bring. If you can pick something that you're really excited about, then that's going to tend to make your delivery more engaging. You might smile while you do it. You're going to look excited. You're going to build better rapport with the interviewer. Is there anything you're really excited about on New York, for example? Or is there anything that if you pick the right topics, it's just going to kind of light you up and make you feel excited to tell it to the interviewer?
Yeah, I mean, I would, I'd mentioned to her, I know she my interviewer coming up, he used to live in New York for years. She just recently moved to San Francisco. So I'd feel comfortable talking about my genuine love for New York. I took a brief break to pursue outdoors activities out in San Francisco, but I've always identified as a New Yorker. I still have my apartment back in New York. I always figured this was temporary. And to me, New York really represents achievement. You're around the best of the best people. There's the hustle of New York. It's quick, even when you're getting a cup of coffee. They do it so much quicker there, and it just, to me, it signifies so much more that everybody, even the coffee shop workers there, want to be the best of the best. And that's why I'm looking to go back there, and I think it's the best place to take my career to the next level.
Even though kind of how the coffee shop people behave is factually a trivial thing, it did make you kind of laugh and smile, and it's very nice to talk about subjects where you're excited. Well, let me move us on to the next kind of question. And you can blend these together. Of course, in real life, it's not strictly divided into exactly this question and that question. But then what makes you think that the Columbia MBA program is the best fit for you?
Well, it obviously has a phenomenal reputation in finance and investment banking. And as I mentioned, the access to New York, which is really the center of every business. But more specifically, when I started my career in investor relations, the group I was in was retail. We worked with retail and apparel companies. So I've always had an interest in that sector, and that's the sector I want to get into, or the coverage group I want to get into in investment banking. And Columbia definitely has a unique offering there with some retail specific classes that I don't think any other schools have. And that's, again, back to the proximity of New York City, retail and finance intersect right there.
Yeah, great. Now, separate from the kind of interview questions, tell me a little bit about what you did to research the Columbia program. Did you visit the campus, or did you drop in on them for the drop-in office hours, or go to some info sessions, or what did you do to get to know the program?
I visited the campus. I'd been up to the campus when I lived in New York anyways. And I visited the campus for an info session. But just broadly speaking, having spent 6 years in New York in finance, I know a ton of people who went to Columbia Business School, so I've always heard about it. And one of my recommenders, who has been a mentor to me since I graduated, he helped me make my transition into equity sales. He is a Columbia Business School alum, and I've heard from him about it for years and years. So I think there's just the New York City immersion has kind of gotten me acquainted with Columbia.
And is there anything that you'd want to say in a kind of why Columbia answer based on some of these experiences? Because it could be exciting to talk about what were the comments that some of your friends made, or what did you see and hear when you did the campus visit? Was there anything you'd be excited to talk about from those?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the best of both worlds, because you get the access to New York City while still having a real campus with a quad and all of that. Like when you step foot onto the campus up in Morningside Heights, it's like a different universe. It's hard to believe you're in New York. So I think that's really important for an MBA, especially if you're looking to get that network. And from the alumni I've spoken to, I've asked if I feel like there's always this concern that it's a city school and people aren't really as involved. But from the people I've spoken to, I learned that a lot of the students do go move to Morningside Heights, even if they already lived in New York City. And that's something I want to do. I still have an apartment downtown, but I'm going to want to move up to Morningside Heights and fully be 100% involved in the community up there.
No, I mean, don't hesitate to kind of mention some of these chats that you had with students or alumni when you're talking about the fit with the school, because then the arguments are very good, of course, about the New York location, or in terms of the kind of retail things. You're certainly right. You have things like the Luxury Education Foundation there with Columbia as well, which are pretty distinctive. But then to those kind of logical, rational arguments, you can always add the kind of excitement of what you felt when you were on campus, and that takes you beyond kind of just repeating things that you could have done with desk research. Now and again, they will ask you a tough question somewhere through here. We know that most people apply to more than one MBA program. Where else are you applying?
I'm applying to NYU because, as I mentioned, I really want to get back to New York City, and it's the best place to pursue investment banking. So I applied there. Yale, also because of the proximity outside New York City. And then I also threw Tuck in there just because it's in the Northeast, and I figured they have a good program too to get my foot in the door in investment banking. But I'm really passionate about moving back to the East Coast and being near New York. I didn't apply to any West Coast schools.
Great. Yeah, this one is actually easy given your mix of schools, because all you want to show is that you pick the schools with some kind of logical process rather than just kind of purely going by the rankings. And then your choices are all very consistently focused around East Coast banking. And it's not going to be hard to convince them that you would accept the Columbia offer over the other schools you listed. So that would be fine.
Okay.
Tuck, even, you can mention it. You don't have to mention it. You don't have to mention every single school, but this is very reasonable.
Okay.
Well, let us shift gears and ask a few different kinds of questions. So usually they will also ask you some behavioral questions or other questions like that. So tell me, so if I came to Cowan and I spoke to some of your colleagues who know you pretty well, then I said, well, how would you guys describe Kate to me? What do you think that they would tell me about you?
I think the first attribute I'd get is that I'm easy to get along with, and I place a lot of value on building relationships. Surprisingly, or you'd think from afar, I mentioned it's a commission-only shop, so you're on your own to take home earnings every day. So some salespeople kind of elbow each other out of the way, but I learned quickly that there's real value to building relationships with the other salespeople. People end up, you need those relationships to help other people out. When I got promoted so early, it was pretty intimidating to be out on my own, and the sales guys next to me really helped me. And to this day, I have very symbiotic relationships with them where we all help each other out. We share information that we hear from other clients, and share meetings, even though sometimes that takes away from the money you're taking home on that meeting. But it's really important to me that I've built those relationships on the desk, because not everybody does. And I think it's led to my success. So I pride myself in, I guess, just being a nice person and easy to get along with, even in an environment where you don't necessarily need to.
Okay, great. Well, what else might they say about you?
It kind of goes in hand in hand with being easy to get along with, but I'm not too pushy with my clients. A lot of salespeople, I don't know, you can see there's like a little bit of a used car salesman on occasion, who try and, they just want to extract every dollar from their clients, and they don't really care if they put them into a bad deal. My view is, if my client's not interested in something, I'm really not going to push them that much further. I value having a good relationship with them long term, and I figure my clients are smarter than all of us, and I think it's important to recognize that. And I think that's led to my strong relationships with my clients too. So I think that's something else that my peers would comment on.
Okay, great. I think that the first one is a very nice one, easy to get along with, and that you backed it up with the examples showing how you interacted with some of the other salespeople. So that's wonderful. As you said, Columbia especially may be worried about if people are community oriented, and you can check that box. Now, the big trick on this question, and this kind of question, like how would your colleagues describe you? The same question could be asked in different ways. So it could also be, what are 3 words that you would use to describe yourself? Or even like if they were very blunt, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Because then a kind of realistic description of what your colleagues think of you probably includes a few things that are not 100% positive. Almost everyone has little things that are either weaknesses or areas for development or things that might annoy their colleagues. And then if you give some of that in an answer, what you kind of get back in terms of showing that you're self-aware is going to dramatically outweigh whatever the particular small negative thing is. What would be 1 or 2 kind of weaknesses or things that you might say about yourself?
Confrontation is definitely my weakness. I've gotten better at it, but there's been an initial example when I started. I split commissions with my trade. On every account, there's a trader and a salesperson. And we split the commissions, and usually it's weighted more towards the salesperson. The salesperson gets 20%, the trader gets 10%. And when I first started, one of the traders argued that he was driving more value on the account and he should have either an even split or an outsized split. And I disagreed. But instead of working it out with him, I went to my boss because I had a good relationship with my boss, and I told him why I thought I deserved more. My boss ended up handling it. But as I've grown and matured in the job, I realized people respect it a little more if you don't bring the boss into it and just talk it out with your peer, even though it's an uncomfortable conversation for me. But I've tried to get better at that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Because like it so often is, the kind of weak areas are often kind of the flip side of some of the strong areas, that you're not pushy, you're so good at kind of getting along with people, but that the flip side of that is that you could train yourself to be more assertive. And fortunately, the MBA will help you do exactly that also.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's something I could have mentioned. And back to your first question about why an MBA and making it more personal, I am excited to take some of those leadership classes where you get to sit down and learn leadership in a classroom setting. I think that's really important, and I've never gotten that before.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of these huge benefits of the MBA environment is that even though you may have been nervous in this story, and rationally so, about, shall we say, like trying a new approach with a trader, or going overboard and being much too assertive and too hard on the person, that in the MBA you have a safe environment where you can experiment much more so than in a real work environment.
Right. Yeah, and to get that feedback on how you can improve your leadership is something I look forward to.
Yeah. Well, tell me about a time at work that you were working on a team and one of the team members wasn't really pulling their weight on the project. And How did you solve that conflict?
So recently we were working on well, I will say, at a commission-only shop, everyone's always trying to pull their weight. It's more maybe somebody has a different interest, and you kind of end up butting heads like that.
Sure, that's fair enough. Tell me about a time that you were butting heads with someone then.
Yeah, sorry. We were working on a deal. We were trying to raise equity for this company that didn't have much revenue, and it was basically we weren't getting anywhere. There was not much appetite for the equity, and I had a client who wanted to issue the company debt instead. So I brought the idea to the bankers, and the bankers were pretty hesitant about it. They were really narrowly focused on the equity. That was what the deal was set as. They were going to get a bigger fee on that. But I kind of knew, since I'm in the position where I hear the feedback from my clients, I knew that there was really no appetite out there. And I had to convince the bankers to let this client do their due diligence in the background, because, and I positioned it saying, like, I'm really interested. I really want to make sure we get this deal done and we get this company money. It would really be a shame if we didn't let my client work on this in the background, and the closing date comes and we don't have the equity. So can you just let them do this? And they agreed, but I could tell they didn't really like it, and I had to go back to my client, and I didn't want to tell the client that the bankers didn't want them involved. So I positioned it as, just do your work in the background. I have a feeling they're going to need you guys. Like, don't take offense to the bankers not having interest. They're set in their ways, and it ended up working out. They did need my client to come in with the debt, but I didn't want to. I guess it was, the bankers and I had different interests, and it was all about how I positioned it to them, that it wasn't that I was trying to make sure the deal got through in any way, and I didn't want it to seem like I just wanted my client to do it because I would get paid on that.
Yeah. I think the story is fundamentally good in the sense that you worked out the conflict very amicably, and the kind of question behind the question on this type of an interview question is, are you going to get along with your classmates? Because if the answer to this kind of a story is, well, yeah, there was this other colleague I was fighting with and he was wrong and I was right, so I kicked him off the team, that just would never work, because you can't do that. Now,
Right.
What you might want to do, is there any way that you can make this a little bit kind of shorter and simpler? Because with these behavioral ones, even though this is not exactly original advice, the kind of STAR format where you lay out what was the situation, kind of what was the conflict between the parties, what did you do, and then why did that solve the problem, that can make it easier to follow the story. And a lot of times, if you kind of discipline yourself to do it in these structures, you can cover the material in a much shorter package.
Okay.
Do you want to think for a moment and see if you can do this one again in a way that you kind of lay it out in those pieces?
Yeah. Okay. So a time where I had a disagreement on a team was, we were recently working on a banking deal where we had to raise equity for a company that didn't have revenue. So we were having trouble getting investors interested in committing to equity. And I had a client who was actually interested in funding debt instead of equity. And I presented the idea to my bankers, and the bankers didn't want to change their ways. They were dead set on getting the equity, and they kept thinking that, if we just keep working on the equity, someone else is going to come in, or we'll find someone who will want to commit the equity. But I knew in my position, since I'm the one that works directly with the equity investors, that there wasn't an appetite out there for it. So I didn't want to offend the bankers by saying, hey, we're probably not going to get the equity. And I also didn't want to tell my clients, or that client, that, oh, the bankers don't want your debt either. because I had a feeling we would come to the end result would be that both parties needed each other. So I had to position it to the bankers that, hey, I'm interested in making sure this company gets funding, whether it's equity or debt. We don't want to fall down and not have a backup plan. So why don't we just let these guys work on it in the background? And I think presenting it that way to the bankers was really helpful. And also presenting it as this is a second choice. I'm just looking out for you guys. Let's let them work on it was helpful.
Okay, great. And one of the questions that you will almost always get at the end, you will get a chance to ask your own questions of the interviewer. So bearing in mind then that it's an alumna who's interviewing you, then what do you think are some of the questions that you might ask to her?
So I obviously there's that softball question, why Columbia, or why she chose Columbia, but I would just want to hear about her experience at Columbia, whether she chose to live up in Morningside Heights and how involved she was. She also, I know she used to work in equity research, and then went to, after her MBA from Columbia, she pivoted into consulting. So I'm curious why she chose consulting instead of investment banking, since that's a question people ask all the time, investment banking versus consulting. I think those are the two ones I have lined up. I'm sure there could be more as our conversation progresses.
Yeah, of course. It's a nice way to think about it, that it is a conversation and you'll ask kind of questions based partly on what you already talked about. The why Columbia one can sometimes be a little bit tricky because you don't want to set yourself up for, so, why'd you go to Columbia? Well, I got dinged at Wharton, which was my real first choice school. So better Columbia than nothing. Then suddenly you poke the bear, you get something negative where it could have just been positive. So you might want to ask about, what were the highlights of her experience at Columbia? And yeah, I like your second question, how you would draw in some of your commonality. So how did the MBA help you to pivot out of your equity research career? And she'll probably be very happy to kind of give you that kind of mentorship and guidance from someone who's almost on the same path as you, just a little bit ahead of you. In the end, if you have a nice chat at the end, if she feels like she got to speak a little bit and that you appreciated her advice, then you've done what you need to do. You're not really looking for gathering any hard facts or things in the question and answer with her, because you could just look up those facts. You could ask the admissions office anyway. Well, this is the end of most of the kind of very common questions. Are there any other things that you'd like to cover before I invite Naren to kind of bring in questions from the audience?
No, I think we covered everything I wanted to. Happy to open it up for questions.
Wonderful. Well, Naren, the GMAT Club moderator, is not here in the video with us, but I know he's in the background looking at the questions that people are posting. So Naren, if we've got questions from the audience, please go ahead and put one of them up on the screen for us. Okay, great. So does the interviewer usually act as a guide while conducting an interview? So highly variable. In general, no. The interviewer is not going to guide you slowly and lovingly like what we've done today, giving you suggestions on things you might have missed that you might say. So this is more for the purpose of a mock interview where I'm giving this advice with a view to help Kate strengthen her answers. Whereas the actual interview, the kind of background is more evaluative and they're trying to judge you. Doesn't mean that they won't be friendly. Now, having said that, I think that with the alumni interviews especially, alumni receive a little bit of training from the school and guidance on what form that they're going to fill out. Columbia, actually, the interview form for them to evaluate you is only 3 or 4 questions long. It's not highly structured. And that means that they have a lot of freedom. So if they like you, if you're fundamentally getting along and you get a good rapport, then yeah, absolutely, they will kind of guide you, or they may switch partly from kind of evaluation mode to sales mode. So if you're in one of these interviews and then suddenly the interviewer starts telling you a lot about the resources of the school and their experience, and then you know things are going in a good direction, because what they want to do at that point is get you excited to enroll. But in general, they won't give you the kind of guidance that I'm giving you today. So, how would you answer if the interviewer asks you how the program should be improved? So I'm going to say, first off, this is a very unusual question for most interviews. The only school where I think that you're going to see a question like that is at Harvard Business School. The reason that Harvard Business School might ask a question like this is that for the case method, they want to make sure you can think on your feet, even if they poke you with a kind of a difficult question, almost like what might happen in a classroom discussion. So they could ask you that, and then they would be looking only for, do you hit the kind of Goldilocks zone that with this kind of a question, you could clearly criticize the program too strongly. Oh, I think Harvard Business School has huge problems with sexism and recruiting an economically privileged student base. Okay, maybe that's too harsh. Or you could give kind of fake feedback. Oh, well, I think Harvard is doing so great. There's just this one company. I'd like to see a case study on it. They're looking for you to give meaningful feedback in a way that's polite. But then, like I said, I do not expect people to get this question in standard MBA interviews because you're not a student. You're not in a very good position to give feedback on the program before you've attended it. Naren, do we have other questions? Yeah, great. So in terms of dressing, if you're going to go in a formal setting, I advise you to wear business formal clothes. So for men, this would normally be a suit and tie. For women, it would be the equivalent. So occasionally I tell my men interviewing that if they feel terribly uncomfortable with the tie and they're going to be just tugging at their collar the whole time, you might get away with a perfectly fitting, clean, iron suit, everything else done, and skipping the tie, but keep it formal. In an informal setting, it really depends a lot on the particulars of the situation. I would tell you never to dress too casually. You won't feel awkward if you've dressed a little bit more than the interviewer, yet you will feel terribly awkward if you show up in something that's too casual and the interviewer has outdressed you. Naren, are there any other questions? So what kinds of questions are interviewers expecting when they invite you to ask the questions? So on the one hand, they're just looking for the fact that you are thoughtful, that you've prepared a question. So that's the first test. If you're in an MBA interview and then they say, well, do you have any questions for me? And then you say, well, no. I think I know everything about your program already. That's kind of a dumb way to answer it because you could foresee that you were going to be asked this question at the end. So, an ideal question is usually going to be something that is fairly open-ended. Ask a question that they have a good chance to actually know the answer. So don't ask anything too obscure. And then usually something pleasant. So like we talked about, why did you choose this school is potentially a risk if the reason is something different. And then something that's more about the highlights of the school, something positive, is more likely to kind of spur that highly positive discussion between you and the interviewer. So something thoughtful, you should have a question prepared and open-ended and positive, something that they know how to answer. So what's the best answer if you get stumped? So, first of all, give yourself a little bit of time to think. If you make a pause before answering a question, it's going to feel much longer to you than it feels to the interviewer. So don't rush. If you really don't know, you could simply admit it. You could try to shift the question to something a little bit different. So, that's a great question. Actually, in my work, I don't work with that kind of company. I work with companies in this part of the industry, and I could tell you a little bit about how that works. Again, this is the kind of topic, current events, which is mostly a Harvard Business School type question. And you should, in fact, brush up a lot on your industry and current news. So in previous cycles, just to give a straw man example, many healthcare applicants at Harvard Business School might be asked about the Affordable Care Act and what did it mean or what would happen if it was repealed. And if you work in healthcare and you have no opinion about the Affordable Care Act, That's kind of weird. So there's certain baseline assumptions in the Harvard interview that you are a curious person who knows about your industry. Again, though, don't worry too much about this for other business schools. It looks like that's all the questions that we have from Naren. So thank you, Kate. Thanks for doing the interview with me today. Then thank you to the audience of GMAT Club members and streamers, and good luck on your interviews. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.